Welcome to the Store Builders Podcast, the place where we talk to industry experts and successful store owners about what it takes to build a thriving e-commerce business. Every episode, we deliver the raw, unfiltered recommendations that will catapult your store to new heights. Ready to get serious about expanding your e-commerce empire? Well, then let's get to work.
I'm your host, Ryan Cowden, and this week we're joined once again by Chris Lemma. In this episode of the Store Builders Podcast, Chris and I discuss what you need to know about fraud protection for your online store. As more and more business goes online, incidents of fraud are also continuing to rise. For online sellers, this could mean significant losses of money, supplies, and time. Today, we're offering some of the best practices and tools you can use to spot and prevent fraud, to successfully minimize the risks of doing business online. On this episode, you'll hear how prevalent online fraud has become. While there are still a relatively small percentage of fraudulent cases, somewhere around 75% of online stores have reported fraudulent encounters with their online business. Then we'll talk about different types of fraud to be aware of. Some of the types we'll cover include friendly fraud, triangulation fraud, and account takeover fraud. After that, we'll discuss some of the best ways to prevent fraud. We'll share some relevant tools you can easily install on your website, as well as some reporting practices to catch fraud before it happens to you. And finally, we'll discuss some best practices for store owners. One of the best things you can do is manually review your purchase orders, looking for anomalies and directly contacting customers to double-check suspicious behavior. If you're looking to improve your ability to spot and prevent fraud for your online business, then this is one episode you won't want to miss. There's a lot of actionable advice in this episode, so grab something to write with because you're going to want to take notes. As always, I'll be back on the other side to wrap up any loose ends. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Chris Lemma. Chris, welcome back to the show. Great to see you again.
Good to see you.
We are talking about fraud protection in e-commerce today. Very important topic. First off, could you just kind of put this into perspective for us a little bit here? How big is the problem of fraud in e-commerce right now?
So almost 75% of online stores, or just under that, reported that they had experienced fraud of some sort in the past year, and expected to see potentially more fraud this next year, right? So it is a problem that people are aware of. Store merchants, right, are aware of it. They have seen it, and they expect it to continue. So it's a big deal. Another way to characterize it, even though it represents a very small percent of all of the online transactions revenue, right? Online transactions are massive. So you go, oh, well, $12 billion is small in comparison to $650 billion, but it's still a massive amount of money, right?
Yeah.
So when people start talking about it as, oh, it's 1% of this, it's 2% of that, it's, they're using percentages, you're like, oh, back up, right? If e-commerce if online revenue via e-commerce is 600 plus billion, then that 1, 2, 3%, right, is massive amounts of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really big deal.
Mm-hmm. And it's expected to continue to rise for the foreseeable future.
Merchants keep seeing it go up, and it's it's the same way that detecting malware, viruses, or other things. You realize, boy, there are people who get into it, and when they get into it, they start getting creative, right?
Yeah.
And the more that people get creative, the more you'll see it happen, right? It's one thing if you're like, the kind of fraud we're talking about is someone places an order and the order's delivered, and then they call back and they say, I never got the order. So you ship out another one, right? That's fraud. That's just plain fraud, right? Like if I bought a book and I got it and my friend says, oh man, I really wanted to buy that book. And I go, oh, no problem. I go to the website and I go, I never got my package. And they're like, yeah, we sent it. We have records that say we sent it. We have a tracking ID and UPS says it delivered it. And you're like, well, you guys can have all the IDs you want in the world. I didn't get it, right? Mm-hmm. And they, some people say, okay, and they ship you another, and then you hand the book to your buddy and you go, here you go. It's friendly fraud, but it's still fraud, right?
Right.
And, that kind of stuff is way simpler than You go to a website because you got an ad, right? You see an ad on Facebook or Instagram. You see an ad. You go, oh, check that out. You click it. It goes to a website. The website looks clean and whatever. And they're offering a product at a relatively cheap price. And you go, okay. And you put all your information in only to find out later, which you don't realize right away because you put it in and it says thank you. And then you look at your credit card, right, the next day, and it has the name there. Everything looks right. You don't suspect anything, but you never have the product.
Yeah.
Right. And then you call up the company and you say, I have the charge. They go, that's not what we put on the billing statement. What? And what you went to was a fictitious site that looked a lot like a real site, except the thing you thought was too good to be true, right? You were buying some, $100 product for $29. And they're like, no, it wasn't, right? And then you look at your card and it shows $99. And you're like, what happened here? Right? You went into a fake store, or worse, you went into the fake store, you put in your information, you get billed the $99, except it's from the real store because they took your information. They went to the real store, they filled out all your information, except they put their address, and now they get the product. You paid for it. You get the real billing, but it's $99 instead of $29. And you're calling going, hey, no, I got the special for $29. And they're like, we don't have a special, right? Like that's never happened.
Right.
So you start playing in triangulation fraud and you're like, this is crazy, right? Like who dreams up these things? But it all happens.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking it might be good to maybe help people identify a couple different types of fraud that are out there. Do you want to you just talked about friendly fraud a little bit. What are some other types of fraud that we should be?
Triangulation fraud, which we just talked about. If someone takes your credit card, I don't know if there's a term for it other than just like, hey, we took your card, right? Like account takeover fraud, right? Which it's so. This is insane to me, but there is a security conference that happens every year in Las Vegas, and it's all about hacking and security and everything else. And a couple years ago, they put an ATM in the Vegas hotel, right, as people were coming into the thing, and people went over and put in their card to take some cash out, right? We're going to go gambling or we're going to go get a drink or whatever. It was a fake ATM, right? And every person who put in their card and punched in their numbers, and then it said, oh, we're sorry, this cash register is out of money, right? And it gives you your card back and you walk away. And they got the copy of the magnetic strip of your card. And they got the keypad and code of your card. And you're like, you're at a security convention. Like, yes, but it was in the right place. Contextually, it looked good. And you just thought, okay. Every few weeks you read about people who've put card strippers on gas stations, on other places, right? And you just kind of go, okay, this is crazy. And there's a kind of account takeover stuff that now plays out. I mean, it's played out for years because online and catalog purchases are with card not present, CNP, right?
Yeah.
And we let that's why you have that little code in the back of the card, right? That someone asks you for because they want to make sure that you have the person you're talking to is holding onto the physical card. But if they've used other machines to take over your account and they have your codes and such, you could lose your account. And you'll see that people make purchases on your account. And thankfully these days banks are really good at monitoring and locking it down pretty quickly because they know you can't be in two places at once, right? Last year I got a phone call from the bank saying, hey, where are you right now? And I said, I'm in San Diego, like where I live. You're not buying gas in Orlando, Florida. And I'm like, no. They go, all right, your account has been closed down. We're going to get you a new one, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what happened? He goes, a person just put $300 worth of gas purchases on your card in Florida. And we saw you just land, in San Diego yesterday from your flight. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know everything, right? Like, so banks are good and helpful, but fraud happens, all the time and in all different kinds of ways.
It seems how much of this is happening over email? Like as a store owner, getting good at determining what's a spam email, because in my experience, people are getting a lot better at sending emails that look authentic but are not,
So the real trick of all this is you got to be really careful what you click on and what links are. I think if I get an email that has a link on it, one of the first things I want to do is I want to, get the details on that link, because it's never going to be paypal.com. But the link text of the thing, in the email says, "Hey, we've had a problem at your PayPal account." And it says, PayPal on it, but the link is going to a completely different address that you go, that doesn't look right. It should be paypal.com. A buddy of mine just got called on the phone, right? He's driving, he's in a rush, he's trying to think of calling his wife, and the person on the phone says, "This is so and so bank, and your account has been hacked, and we can see it. There is we're gonna stay on the line with you, and we're gonna help you." And he's like, "Oh my God, thank you," right? And so they start asking him to verify certain things and asking him for certain information. Unbeknownst to him, it wasn't the bank.
Wow.
Right? And they took his information, and within a minute, they had emptied out tens of thousands of dollars out of an account.
Jeez.
Right? So he then gets another call, right? This time from the bank, and it's the, "Hey, did you know you withdrew all your money, right, all at once? Like, that's suspicious." And he's like, "No, but you guys just called me," right? So you're like, ah. So
Wow.
if I get a phone call that's suspicious, if I get a phone call that is, or if I get an email that is from someone, I often just write, not hit reply, not hit call back to that number. I write to the vendor, whether it's a merchant or whether it's a bank or whatever, or I call a merchant or a bank, right? I got an IRS letter not last week, the week before last. "Oh, my house is going to be, attached with liens and da 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 da." But I'm looking at the letter and I'm like, it looks official, but there's something fishy about it because it doesn't have a case number on it or anything else.
Mhm.
So I call the number and I go, "What department is this? What's my case reference number? Tell me what property this relates to," right? And then the guy says, "Well, we're a group of lawyers." Da, da. And I'm like, "Okay, hang on, right? You sent me an email, you sent me a letter that looked like it was the IRS, but you're not the IRS, right? And I know I don't have a problem with the IRS, but this letter made it look like I had a really big one. So go to the source, but go to the source, unrelated. But of course, the whole point of why we're talking about this is because there are tools, right, that you can, as a store builder, there are tools that you can recommend to your merchants, to your store owners, to say, you may want to take a look at this to help you, because they're looking, right? These software tools, much like the bank has tools, the tools are looking at, high order for, high order value for first time orders, or strange locations, or rapid duplicate orders, right? Same amount of items for the same price ordered over and over, right?
Yeah.
Duplicative orders. They're looking for all this stuff to make sure that you don't have something suspicious running through your platform, right? And they're doing address verification, right? They're doing so there are software tools that are much like the way the bank does its own evaluation. They're willing to do it, and that's as a store builder, part of what you want to do is say, listen, I don't do this. The developer, I don't have all the rules and regulations for how to protect your store, but there are some tools out here that could help, right? And so let's look at some of those.
Yeah. Let's look at some of those. Let's just talk about practices, best ways to construct your store to avoid getting caught in fraud or hacking. Are there any best practices you can do just manually?
I mean, yeah, sure. There's some, as a store builder, you're always gonna want some really good reporting that allows you to see things that don't look right, and allow you to flag certain things. So you might create a first time order report. So when the first time someone comes in and makes a purchase, you get a report of it. When you get a report of it, you can look and see, wait, the average first order is $19, but this one is $799. That looks weird. Maybe I should follow up and thank them. and then realize this is all fraud, right?
Okay.
So by all means, certain reports will help, but I think the best thing you can do as a store builder is take a look at some of the tools that you can integrate. They all have some price, or many of them have price associated with them, but it's worth looking at
Mhm.
to just make sure that the customer is going to be okay.
Okay. Oh, let's dive into some of those then. What are some of those tools?
So if you're a serious store doing serious work and you got a lot of transactions coming in and out, then the first player I'd tell you to look at is a product called Bolt, BOLT.com. Bolt not only makes the checkout clean and easy, but it does a bunch of fraud protection, chargebacks, all that kind of stuff. It does it all in the background for you, and
Okay.
that's a big deal. Now, it's of all the tools out there, right? It's their price points are going to look a little different, and each time you go to do it, you need to talk with them because it's going to be tied to how you think about your store. But it is, if you're a serious store, it's worth doing, right?
Mhm.
You don't want to play in the game of I just want a low flat fee, because if you're a serious store, you're like, what? I don't care about it. Like, I'm losing money to fraud. I
Yeah.
don't know what I pay if it eliminates that and helps me generate more revenue. So the first player for serious stores, if you're a serious store builder, if you work with serious stores, I tell you to look at Bolt. But not everybody's working on a store of that size, and so then you start getting into, well, are there other options for me, right?
Mhm.
And it turns out there are.
Mhm. What are some of the other options?
So one of them that I tell you to look at is a product called Fraud Labs. Fraud Labs Pro is a product that costs, I think, something like $30 a month. It works for Magento. It works for PrestaShop. It works for Shopify. It works for WooCommerce, right? It works
Mhm.
for a bunch of different players. They have a free plan, but when you go to buy their stuff, right, you get all of these underlying rules, right?
Yeah.
What it is all just screening, right? Ways to monitor and make sure that what's getting ordered is what should be getting ordered at the right person from the right place,
Mhm.
ordering the right quantity, right? So they're just doing a lot of that scanning. So Fraud Labs Pro is one I'd take a look at. There's another one called Subuno.
Okay.
Subuno. Again, Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce, $19 a month. There's no free plan, but there is a free trial, and they boast about 20 plus fraud detection screens, to make sure that everything matches up. A lot of this is, hey, if you're ordering with a um, credit card address in one location, then are you shipping to that location? And if you're
Mm.
shipping to another country entirely,
Yeah.
maybe that's suspicious, right?
Okay. Yeah. Are there any things that come, like if your store is hosted on like a WooCommerce, are there standard features that come into play, or maybe special plugins you could activate?
Well, the good news is those that I just mentioned
Mhm.
have extensions for WooCommerce, right? So
Okay.
buy the subscription, because a lot of these function as a SaaS because they don't
Mm.
want to take those rules, right? Let's say you had all that fraud detection rules and you stuck it in an actual plugin and you put it on the site. Well, because WooCommerce is open source, that is likely open source, which means I, as a developer, can go in and I can open it up and take a look at the code. And if I see how you're catching fraud, I can do stuff to
Mm.
get past it. The whole point of fraud detection is I don't know what you're checking, so I don't know how to beat
Mm.
you. But
Okay.
in order to do that, I got to take all that stuff and sit it in the cloud and hide it from you so you can't see it on the store. So they often come with a plugin that sits in WooCommerce that takes the order, runs it out there through the plugin out to the SaaS. The SaaS runs its rules, scores it, comes back and says it's good, and then it gets to go through. So there are plugins, but they're tied to those services.
Okay. Great. Let's kind of wrap up by talking about store owners. What's the best way to kind of keep them in the loop in terms of fraud and security?
So what I tell every store owner is look at your orders, right?
Mhm.
Unless you're getting hundreds of thousands of orders an hour a day, you probably could look at every order, right? So every
Yeah.
day, take a look at, so what I do with my bank account, right, is every 2 days I log in and I just make sure that what's happened in the last 2 days is all the stuff I expect to happen, right? All the orders I expect. And the moment I find something that doesn't look right in my bank, I call my bank and I go, I don't think this is, mine. Or I might read the thing and stick it in a browser and go look it up and go, oh yeah, that is the thing I bought a while ago. Now they build it. It must be shipped, right? And so you go, okay, but I'm looking at my regular bank account every 2 days to make sure that everything there is right. A merchant should do the same thing. Take a look at your orders. Put out the right report that shows you, here are the orders that came in the last day. Look it over and make sure everything looks right. If you know that people on average spend $68 per transaction and you get 70, 50, 60, 65, and then one that says 2,375, take a second and look at it, right? Yeah. The merchant, you just look at that and you go, yeah, this isn't right. This seems wrong, right? Let's reach out to the person, talk to them, figure out what's going on.
Right.
And of course, if they say, yeah, I purchased it, I'm so in love with your stuff, I bought it for my whole company, then you're like, well, congratulations and thank you so much.
Right. And when you stumble upon something that you conclude is definitely fraudulent, are you reporting it? Are you just canceling it? Or
yeah, well, first of all, I want to get on, reach out to the customer and make sure that you're like, hey, did you do this? No, I didn't. Okay, well then, I think you should call your bank and you should report that. Let the customer own their part, but you're also like, and by the way, I'm canceling this order, right? Yeah. I don't want my team to start grabbing all this product and putting it in boxes and paying for shipping and getting it out only to realize we're never going to get this money and it's never going to get to you. So, so you let the customer know one part of it and then you kill it on the other side.
Okay. Chris, this was great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. All right, folks, there you have it. That wraps up my conversation with Chris Lema. He shared a ton of valuable insights and advice today on the best ways to protect your online store from fraud. We also shared some tools and resources which will all be linked up in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please consider subscribing, sharing with a friend, or leaving us a review in your favorite podcast directory. Until next time, best of luck in all that you do, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Store Builders Podcast.